Hey everybody, my name is Jacob and I'm your regular whiskey dude, and today we'll be having an extremely subjective review of the Singleton 12. Cue the intro. So as a reminder, the Extremely Subjective Reviews is a series in which we dive into a certain whiskey, but we don't necessarily get super caught up about assigning any sort of rating system or trying to figure out what are the exact tasting notes, because as I've mentioned before, whiskey is a very subjective experience, and let's keep it that way because that's the beauty of it. So Singleton 12, a whiskey that is not necessarily treated as a very spectacular whiskey, but I think, and be sure to watch to the end of the video, there is a certain purpose to be served for that whiskey. So Singleton 12 is a whiskey with a kind of peculiar background because Singleton is not a name of a distillery, because usually you would have a name of a distillery being the forefront of the brand of a single malt whiskey. For example, Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, Aberlour, Lagavulin, right? These are names of distilleries. Whereas with Singleton, you actually have a kind of a brand name that only associates itself to certain distilleries. That's why you have a Singleton of Dufftown, a Singleton of Glen Ord, and Singleton of Auchroisk. That enables to kind of attach the Singleton name to certain distilleries. And to add upon that, Singleton is part of Diageo, a extremely massive whiskey and spirits conglomerate that owns actually Johnnie Walker, as well as all of the classic malt selections, most notably Lagavulin, Kulila, Talisker, as well as Glenkinchie, and many more. Okay, so as per usual, let's take a look at the label to see what are the basic, kind of facts and figures about Singleton 12. So let's have a read of the description. So the Singleton, 12 years old, whiskey from both Pedro Jimenez Oloroso seasoned casks and refill ex-bourbon casks have been hand-selected for their honey notes and nutty intensity. Nutty intensity, I like that. The taste is a hive of activity full of soft-cooked apples, luscious brown sugar, hints of creamy coffee, and roasted nutty notes. This is ambrosial decadence worth savoring. But with Singleton, as I've mentioned before, it's also an interesting thing with the casks, because once you read the bottle label, they actually mention of using sherry seasoned casks. These are actually ex-bourbon casks that are filled with sherry to introduce some of the sherry notes to the cask, and only then they introduce the whiskey to the cask. So it's not like a full-blown sherry cask, but it's a sherry infused cask. And I think if you take into account the fairly accessible price, it makes sense, because then you're actually introducing more sherry notes to the whiskey at a more cost-effective manner. And by no means it's not like a full-blown sherry whiskey, but there are some slight hints to it. Okay, so I think this is time to start off the fun part, which is actually having the drink. If I recall properly, Singleton does have quite a twang to it. Okay. Usually that first sip is not very telling. Yeah, so the first, I think, two notes, actually contrary to what we just discussed about sherry refill casks, I do kind of pick up the ex-bourbon cask typical note of some similar whiskey, say like Glenmoray or Glenmorangie. But there is some sort of coffee-esque nutty element to it, and a slight hint of these kind of dark fruit elements. Definitely there is some sort of, I'd say, dessert element to it. Definitely tastes like a whiskey that would go well with some sort of dessert, if that makes sense. The only thing historically that I did not like, the neck pours are quite harsh. And be sure to let me know if you had a similar experience of that. Every single Singleton pour from the neck from a newly opened bottle usually gave me a very kind of harsh experience. However, if the bottle would stay for a longer time span already opened, say like a month or two, the next pours tend to be way more smooth and kind of tamed in a good way. And usually my most favorite pours from Singleton tend to come from the latter stages of the bottle, so maybe there's some kind of chemistry related to it. I did some research on the neck pour, and I think it's quite a legitimate claim by some of the whiskey aficionados that usually it's something associated with the air mixture and some slight evaporation from what I've noticed. But for me, it was definitely legitimate. Okay, so now the subjective part. So historically, I think I'm at the 4th or 5th bottle of Singleton. So in some ways, it actually proves a point that I'm a constant enjoyer of Singleton. I like the accessibility of the price. In Poland, it's even cheaper than like 25 bucks. So that's already a big bargain. Definitely enjoy the whiskey that it kind of becomes sometime in the middle of the bottle, and especially to the end. It's a very good introduction to whiskey from the kind of sherry side. It's not like a full-blown double cask maturation like, say, Aberlour or Glenrothes. However, I like these kind of small hints of something additional above that typical ex-bourbon cask whiskey. Is it the most spectacular whiskey of all? Absolutely not. It's definitely a okay whiskey. And for me, the whiskey also serves a very practical purpose because I'm actually using Singleton as my kind of warm-up slash calibration drink whenever I'm, wanting to have a sip of, say, like Glendronach or Glenfarclas. Warm-up whiskeys or calibration sips also have quite a strong purpose because you want to get used to the alcohol and to the kind of harshness of drinking like a 40% ABV spirit, and then you're kind of capable of acknowledging some of the tasting notes and just have a better kind of more rounded experience. Definitely props to Singleton for coming up with a quite interesting spin to a entry-level single malt whiskey. I definitely appreciate that. So if you're looking to have a whiskey to kind of be your warm-up calibration pour on a weekend or any given night, then definitely Singleton makes a lot of sense if you're especially aiming for some sort of sherry note experience further on. Okay, so that's it for today. We're enjoying the Singleton 12 of Dufftown. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to get notified about upcoming videos. If you would want to support the channel, then please go to the description below because there are various ways to do so and would massively appreciate that. Thanks for watching, and let's finish up the pour of the Singleton. Cheers. And outro.